Welcome, welcome, welcome. My name is Siege Fairy VGC. In this case, the VGC stands for Very Good Content, which is what I hope to be making here today. If you don't know who I am, that's alright. Not a lot of people do. No one watches these videos, but that's fine. As a disclaimer, I do not have a script or anything. The only thing I have is what's in my mind and what's on the screen right now. So please bear with me if I fumble my words. I just find it really difficult to actually read off a script or anything like that. It doesn't sound natural to me. But with that out of the way, what's the topic? Topic is going to be basic Pokemon mechanics. You know, the kind of stuff that if you are trying to get into the next level of Pokemoning, such as competitive Pokemon battling or hardcore Nuzlocking, is probably pretty important to know. Now, if you've already done that kind of stuff, you probably know everything I'm going to be saying. This video may not be that important for you. If you want to continue playing casually, like I have for 9 generations, that's fine too. But you may find some of the ways that the Pokemon game does stuff in the background interesting. Now, a few things, I'm going to be lying a lot in this video because I think it's important. If you're upset that anyone would lie to you, you might want to click off. I have a few friends that are very upset whenever lying happens, even if it is for a good reason. And yeah, if you're one of those, don't watch anymore. The other thing is I'm just going to get some stuff wrong because I'm not experienced in any of this kind of stuff. I am a dummy. Also, more disclaimers, because what is a Siege Fairy video without 5 minutes of disclaimers before we begin? Not something I would make, that's for sure. I've never done any competitive Pokemon battling before. I never really played against other humans. The only time I did was when I was in 2nd grade with my original blue version, and I had a carpool person who also had another Pokemon game. And we fought. He was in 7th grade. I was in 2nd. I never won. Now, this person also taught me about the Cinnabar Island glitch and introduced me to Super Smash Bros. So it's not like I'm salty or anything at them, but you know, I never really felt the need to go even further. The other thing that I want to mention is that I stole this video. Everything that I'm going to be saying today is probably already covered in Wolfie VGC's video. If you don't know who Wolfie is, he is Wolf Glick. He is a former world champion in the Pokemon competitive scene and still one of the best Pokemon battlers in the world. And he has a Pokemon University kind of video series where it just goes over, hey, competitive Pokemon battling is fun and it's not as intimidating as you think. The thing about YouTube is that it's really good at algorithms. It knows what you want even if you don't. So when I typed in how to competitive Pokemon battle for dummies, I got recommended this video. I watched the first one, and I've already known about Wolfie for over a year now. But when I watched it, it was about an hour long or something. I was inspired to make this myself. And I think that is really awesome. But like I said, everything I took is stolen. Wolfie, if you somehow find this video and you want me to take it down, just let me know. You know, just reach out. If you want to say, hey Siege, good job, or hey Siege, you suck, that's fine too. Just get in touch. Anyway, the basics of Pokemon. If you don't know what Pokemon is, I don't know why you're here. Pokemon is a creature collector RPG, JRPG. Honestly, it's kind of an entire genre now. I just know any of these games as Pokemon games. It is by far the biggest thing. Anyway, you end up creating a lot of little creatures, or capturing a lot of little creatures. There's over 1,000 of them now. There's 400, I think, in the newest version, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, and they evolve. So whenever you level them up, they can evolve into a more powerful, better form. So Bulbasaur here will evolve into Ivysaur. Ivysaur will evolve into Venusaur. Let me tell you right now, there is no reason to use a lower form than the most advanced form that you can. So if you're, say, competitive Pokemon battling, there's no reason to use a Ivysaur if you have access to a Venusaur. There's no reason to use something like a Murkrow when you have access to a Honchkrow, because Honchkrow just has better stats. That's all it is. Now, Pokemon have types. There are 18 types in the world of Pokemon. They run the gamut from fire to fairy to dragon to bug. There's a lot of them. And each Pokemon can have one or two types. For example, we have Magikarp here. Magikarp is just a pure water type. It evolves into Gyarados. Gyarados is a water flying type, even though it doesn't learn that many flying moves. I think there have been several generations where it didn't learn any flying moves. Oh well. Yep, two types. So this right here is Butterfree. Butterfree is a bug, obviously. That is a butterfly. But it is also flying because butterflies fly. So these interact in very interesting ways. Types are mostly used to determine strengths and weaknesses. You can kind of look at this chart, and all the images that I have here, or the vast majority of the images I have here, are either really bad art that I have done, good art that I have commissioned, which was like exactly one of them at the very beginning, my avatar, my profile picture, or stuff that I have stolen from Bulbapedia. I prefer Bulbapedia, but there are a bunch of other like Pokemon mechanic aggregation type websites that you can go ahead and check out. Just use your search engine of choice and they will give them to you. Bulbapedia, if you don't like me doing this kind of stuff, are you even a like individual person? I thought you were like a Wikipedia type of thing. Anyway, so types are usually used to determine weaknesses and strengths. So if you go on this chart and you can see attacking type and defending type, and you can just see how they affect each other. So like fighting will hit fighting for neutral damage, ×1 damage. But fighting has a weakness against flying. So if it tries to hit something that's flying type, it'll do half damage. A lot of these kind of make sense, although it's very, very difficult for me to like understand which of these actually make sense and which of these I just inherently know because I've been playing Pokemon games for over 2 decades now. So for example, fire and grass. Grass is, if we go to fire, who is attacking grass, fire, we go over to grass right here. Fire burns grass. That kind of makes sense, right? Fighting is really good against rock. Why? Because fighting, like people who are good at fighting can just break up the rocks. Like some of that stuff makes sense. If it doesn't make sense, then I don't know of another way to kind of do anything other than memorizing. Like you'll get experience by playing the game, obviously, but if you don't want to play the game or if you don't have that experience, you just gotta remember it. The other thing, because we do have the 2 types, there are no moves that have 2 types. It's just a single type move, so that's the only thing that you have to worry about. But if you do have, say, a rock grass Pokemon, you can do fighting is going to go over rock ×2, grass is ×1, so you just do ×2 ×1. You do double damage to a rock grass. If you are a let me see, trying to get it 4 times. If you're a water Pokemon and you're trying to damage a ground rock Pokemon, you are doing a water move on them. Ground, you do double damage. Rock, you do double damage. You multiply those together, you get 4. So your strengths kind of double, your weaknesses kind of double. The only other thing that's interesting to mention here is the 0 times. So that means normal moves cannot affect ghosts. Fighting moves cannot affect ghosts. So if you're using a fighting move and you are hitting something that has a ghost type, even if it is a multi-type, you do 0 damage. So those immunities are kind of important to know about. Everything else, I think, even the immunities, you'll just kind of learn over time, especially when you start getting into stuff like psychic and dark and dragon and fairy, that those just kind of aren't intuitive. how they interact with everything else. But, you know, whatevs. Okay, so there are six main stats in a Pokemon. The first one is HP, or health. It's a health bar. If you've ever played a video game, any kind of RPG, you know what a health bar is, right? So, yeah, there's not much to it. One thing to note about HP in this game is that as long as you have any kind of HP, it doesn't affect how much damage you do. Like, you don't, like, there's some JRPGs that will end up saying, like, the weaker you get, kind of like a red fog kind of situation. If so, the more damage you take, the less damage you deal, because you're like weak a little bit, you're trying to fight back. They don't have that in Pokemon. As long as you have 1 HP, you're good to go. Attack and special attack, these are basically the same thing. When you deal damage, your attack stat determines how much damage you do. The bigger you are, the harder you punch. So, yeah, pretty easy. Defense and special defense are the defense actions of this. When you take damage, the higher your defense is, the less damage you take. So if someone with a big attack is hitting someone with a big defense, it's more or less the same kind of thing as someone with a small attack hitting someone with a small defense. So the interaction of attack for the attacker and defense of the defender are really, really important. So there is a physical special split. That's why we have attack and special attack, defense and special defense. And in the future, I'm going to be referring to them as physical attack and physical defense, even though they are just attack and defense, just to make sure that this is not something, there's no ambiguity there. So there is physical attack, physical defense, special attack, special defense. Each individual move is either a physical move or a special move. So I found a way to describe this. Superheroes are super popular nowadays, and they have been for the last, 5 or 10 years or something like that. Marvel, MCU and stuff is super big. So I'm going to use an example. Superman. Superman is really good at brawling. He can punch rocks, he can punch buildings, he can lift up buildings, stuff like that. That is kind of a physical attack. Having someone that Superman is punching, like the rock, is going to be big physically defensive. Like that rock's physical defense is resisting the punching. Now, Superman also has like laser beams coming from his eyes. That would be more of a special attack. So I guess like any kind of technology that is resisting those laser eyes would be using its special defense to resist those laser eyes coming out. So, yeah, that's kind of how I think about it. Anything supernatural is usually going to be tending toward special. Anything that's more just I hit you hard is going to be tending more toward physical. Now, there are always going to be a little bit of an exception here or there. It's better to just look at the move and just kind of figure it out yourself. Like, there are indications on that. We'll get into that in a little bit. Now, the last stat is speed. Speed is not initiative. If you're used to playing any kind of role-playing game, like Dungeons and Dragons is kind of in the news lately. So if you're used to playing something like Dungeons and Dragons, you would have an initiative score, you'd roll something, and the higher your initiative, the more likely you are to go first. But it's not always the case. There's this little bit of randomness here. That is not true with speed. Whoever has the highest speed goes first. Now, if there is an exact tie, let's say that we both have 100 speed, there is going to be some sort of die roll. There is a randomness. There is a speed tie that sometimes, some turns, one Pokemon will move first. Some turns, another Pokemon will move first. I did not actually look at how that works. I'm just going to assume it's random. So super important whenever you're discussing Pokemon. The vast majority of these images, whenever I'm talking about a Pokemon, are going to be from my new favorite Pokemon, or at least my new favorite Pokemon from the new Pokemon Violet, Tinkaton, because Tinkaton is adorable. I love her so much. So the base stats, this is basically what a Pokemon has to deal with. So Tinkaton has 85 HP, 75 attack, 77 defense, 70 special attack. Special defense is 105, speed is 94. The ratios here are important, and whenever you're comparing this Pokemon to another Pokemon, the ratios are important. But when you look here, you can see what the range is. This doesn't mean that every Tinkaton is going to have exactly 85 HP or 75 attack or whatever. Like, these numbers are used in a formula to calculate stuff, and there is a lot more to that formula than just what is the base stat. So every Tinkaton is going to be a little bit different, and that's part of the reason that playing Pokemon is super fun, that you get attached to these creatures that are unique. They're yours. They're your friends, right? That's part of the reason that I'm using Tinkaton in my first competitive scene. So a way to think about this is, here's a Copperajah. Here is a Mousehold. Mouseholds are tiny little mice. This tiny little mice, this family of mice are going to end up being smaller, weaker than this big elephant, right? But maybe they have some advantages. Maybe they are faster. Maybe they're more evasive, right? Whereas this big old elephant gonna hit hard, it's going to resist a lot of damage, that kind of stuff, right? Now, when you compare these two species, you can kind of say, yeah, every Mousehold is going to be smaller and probably weaker than every Copperajah. But when you look at any individual Copperajah, that Copperajah is going to be a little bit different. Maybe this one is a little bit tougher. Maybe this one hits a little bit harder. Maybe this one is just super slow and this one's super speedy. So there are going to be variations within the species, but you can look at a species and kind of get a good idea of what this particular Pokemon is going to do, or at least what their stats are going to be. Now, this differs with actual stats. As a comparison, this is my Kyla, my Tinkaton that I use throughout my game. These are the base stats right here. I'm level 79, so I should be somewhere approximately in between these, like 50 and 100. So I should be, these are the actual numbers that are associated with my Tinkaton. She has 247 HP, she has 197 attack, 151 defense, 249 speed, 195 special defense, and 121 special attack. These were used in the formula, but I have a lot of stuff going on in the background, EVs and IVs and whatnot, which we'll get into in a bit. Maybe it's right now. It is right now. Individual values. These are basically a Pokemon's genes. If you go back to middle school biology and you know how genes work and stuff like that, each stat, so each of these 6 stats have its own individual value. These are ranked from 0 to 31. At level 100, each stat will be IV value higher than it normally would be. So basically, if you have a 31 IV, you're going to have 31 more stat points in that area than you would with someone who has 0 IVs in that stat point. At level 100, it comes incrementally. It's not an all or nothing kind of thing. So at level 50, you're going to have like 15 or 16, I forget what the actual number is, higher than someone who has 0. So if you have 31, every 3 levels or so, you'll be getting another +1 that you normally wouldn't. At the end of the game, I think this is after you beat the game itself, you will see generally what the numbers are. So special attack here for this Pokemon is no good. That's probably means 0 or very close to 0. Whereas special defense says best. I think best is designed to actually be 31. So my special defense, as far as IV goes, is as high as it can be for this Pokemon. I forget which Pokemon this is. Unfortunate. So how do you get good IVs? Because obviously you want high numbers, right? Well, one way is that you can breed. That's what I spent a lot of time doing in Heart Gold and Soul Silver, specifically Soul Silver. I should probably not keep saying both versions. Soul Silver, there were a lot of different mechanics to trying to get the perfect Pokemon, which I won't go into anymore because it doesn't matter because you have hyper training. Hyper training came along in the last few generations, which unfortunately I have not really played. And what you do is if you have the money and your Pokemon is high enough level, you can just hyper train them. You can give something along and you can just max out your IVs. This makes things a lot more even across the board. You don't have to have people who have the time and knowledge to breed the best Pokemon. You can just say hyper train them, grind up the money, hyper train them. Now they have the best IVs possible. EVs, or effort values. This is basically training. So if you beat up things that are good at attacking, you'll attack better. If you beat up strong things, you'll get stronger, that kind of thing. Now, this has worked differently in the past, but currently each Pokemon has its own yield. So whenever you defeat a Pokemon, you will gain EVs. So this Tinkaton right here, every time you defeat a Tinkaton, you will get 3 special defense EVs. Now, this is from Eeyore, who was my Mudsdale throughout my Pokemon game that I played. And I think this little yellow square, I don't know if this doesn't, if you can see that. I think you can see this throughout the game on your check summary screen. You have to hit L whenever you're looking at their stats, the L button. But you can see, in general, where your EVs are. So this, I think, is pretty typical. I don't have anything super optimized or anything. I was just playing the game for fun. So I have a fair amount of HP here. I have a little bit of attack, a lot of defense, some special defense in there. My speed is still pretty low, and so is my special attack. One of those arrows, I can't remember which, is actually the EVs. They don't give you specific numbers. There's a reason for that, and the reason is that the designer, Game Freak as a whole, if you show all these exact numbers, the Pokemon become more just a bundle of stats, which is kind of important when you're doing these hardcore things like competitive Pokemon battling or Nuzlocking or anything like that. But I agree that hiding those specific values when playing the game makes them feel more alive. It's part of the reason that I'm as attached to my team as I am now. Now, the effort value effect is every 4 points you put into a stat is a +1 stat at level 100. You can get 252 in any one stat. This translates to +63 at level 100 or +32 at level 50. And you have a total of 510 overall. So you can max 2 stats like I've shown here. This is also my Tinkaton. I'm going to be changing this soon. I got some EV decreasing berries, but all that is stuff we'll talk about later. You can max 2 stats and then have an extra point to go somewhere else if you want. But this is a limited resource, so it is something that you kind of need to focus on to figure out where you want to put them, because you do max out of EVs, unlike IVs where you can have a 31 across the board. The last thing that involves stats are nature. There are 25 natures in general. I really liked this before I knew how they affected stats, because it was like, oh man, I have a hardy Tinkaton, and that was really cool. So each one of these gives a +10% on one stat and a -10% on another stat. You can see 5 of them are just neutral natures, because you have a increased attack and then a decreased attack. +10 and -10 cancel out to 0. Now, you can see this on your stat screen in the more recent generations of Pokemon, where you can just say, oh, your special defense is good and your attack is going down. So your special defense is going up, has that +10%, and your attack is going down, that -10%. Pretty much everything about these used to be things that you would need to focus on, but now it is really easy to change, which I really appreciate. I really like the quality of life that the more recent Pokemon games have been going with. So yeah, bringing it all together. IVs are inherent to your Pokemon, but you'll want to max them out either by getting lucky, breeding, or hyper training. There is no reason that you do not want a 31 in every single stat. EVs are a limited resource you'll need to manage. There are two general ways that you'd want to manage the EVs: is shore up weaknesses or expand strengths. Sometimes you do want to say, I want to be just faster than this one thing that can really cause me problems. I need to have one more speed than that, so I'll always go first. That's also something that you can try and manage with EVs. Nature is akin to EVs. It's a boost or a penalty that you want to use to make yourself stronger or to minimize your weaknesses. The one thing about nature is that because it is a percentage boost, whereas IVs and EVs are not percentage boosts, it really encourages you to get that plus 10% on whatever is a really strong stat. So whenever you're looking at your stat spread and you have a really high attack, for example, you're probably going to want to boost that attack just because that means more overall stat points going to your Pokemon. Similarly, because it's a percentage boost or a percentage penalty, whenever you have a weakness, you're going to want to reduce whatever your lowest stat is because, once again, it has the lowest effect on stats. And this isn't like an always or nothing kind of thing. It's just like general things you want to think about. What is the overall stat penalty or boost to my Pokemon? If you care about the formulas, you can just read them here. 2 times base stat plus blah blah blah. Like, it's everything that we've already been over. The one thing to note is that nature, it does not affect HP. HP is always left out of nature because HP has this entirely different formula because it's a very different stat from everything else. But nature, that 1.1 or that 0.9 is taken at the very end. So after you calculate everything else using your stats, then you multiply it by that nature factor. Okay, moves. Pokemon can have up to 4 moves. If you're playing competitive Pokemon, there's no reason you wouldn't have all 4 moves. Each of these moves has a type. So Play Rough right here is Fairy type. A category. This is whether it's physical or special. A power. This tells you how much damage it's going to do. An accuracy. This is a percentage base, so a 90 accuracy is 90%. 9 out of 10 times I will hit. And then PP. I think it's power points. I can't remember exactly. That's how many times you can use it before you can't use it anymore. Once again, the type chart is relevant because whenever you look at this is a fairy move. You are going to see how much damage you deal. You deal 1 times damage to normal types. You deal 2 times damage to fighting types. So that's relevant whenever you take types into account. Categories. This determines whether you use physical, that's this little POW symbol right here, or special. That's this like hypno symbol right here. This is from my Umbreon NB. I love them. Power. This is how much damage the move does. Higher numbers are generally better. So this Gigaton Hammer doing 160 base power means it's going to be doing a ton of extra damage. Adjustments. A few things to note about power is there are a few adjustments. Same type attack boost or stab is 1.5. This means, for example, Tinkaton is a fairy steel type. If Tinkaton uses a steel move, steel type doing a steel move, they do 1.5 times damage. So for example, this 160 base power gets multiplied by 1.5, so instead of 160 effective power, it's actually doing 240 effective power because I am steel type. Crit, if you get a crit, we'll talk about crits in a bit, you do 1.5 times damage, so that 240 would be increased even more to be like 360. And then there's a randomness factor, there's a 15% swing. The damage formula calculates how much damage you're doing at max, but it is possible that you can do 85% of that, or anything between 85 and 100%. This is just a range. So we have stat stages, which is something super important to know about. Stat stages, in certain situations, mostly moves, can move a stat by a stage. This can affect you or your opponent, or both. It can be a bonus, or it can be a penalty. And you can be affected by multiple stages at once. So you can go up by 2 stages, you can go down by 3. There's a bunch of different ways that this can interact. Each stage is 50% of your bonus, of your stat. That's what I should have put there. So if you have 100 attack and you get a boost of a stage, your attack is now effectively 150. If you get 2, then you get 200. You can only this stat stages maxes out at 6. So if you get 6 boosts to your attack or special attack, whatever you're using to attack, you do 400% more damage. That's 100% because it's your normal attack, and then an extra 300% for the 6 boosts. If you take 6 penalties to your attack, you're doing 1/8 of the damage that you would do. Your attack is effectively 1/8 because you'd be halved all those times. There are a few stats that matter whenever you're talking about boosts and whatnot that are not part of the main 6 stats. Evasion, the higher this is, the more likely you are to dodge an attack entirely. Even if something has 100% accuracy, you can dodge it if you have evasion. Accuracy, the higher this is, the more likely you are to hit. If you have 100% chance to attack, accuracy and evasion will cancel out for this. Like, it's the difference between accuracy and evasion that matters. But if you have, like we showed on Tinkaton had quite a lot of 90% chances to attack. Extra accuracy boost will actually increase that from 90% to like 99% to whatever. Both of these can be maxed out by 3. There's an entire chart that you can look up if you're interested. At max evasion, 100% accuracy move will have a 1/3 chance to hit. And at max accuracy, if you had something that was like a 20% chance to hit, it would be moved up to like an 80 or a 60% chance. Yeah, a 60% chance to hit. So a 50% accuracy move will always hit if you have max accuracy. Now, crits. There's a normal chance to crit with any move. 1 out of 24 chance, that's about a 4% chance to crit. Now, if you boost it, you can also boost crit chances. 1 boost will get you up to an 1/8, 2 boosts will get you up to half, and then 3 boosts or any more. I don't know why you would go above 3. You get a 1% chance. Every time you attack, you get a crit. Crit effects. You deal 1.5 times damage at the very end. So whenever you're doing all your damage calculations, you just multiply it by 1.5. This is super important. You ignore any negative attack boost from an attacker. So if the attacker is critting and they have some attack penalties, they ignore those penalties. They act as if they had their max attack. Similarly, you ignore any positive defense boost from the defender. So if someone's been boosting up their defense to be able to take no damage from you and you crit, you ignore all those boosts. So the minimum you'll be attacking with is 100% strength. And the maximum they'll be defending with is 100% strength. That's the way that I think about it. Crits are really, really good to be able to get past any of these nerfing or like stacking, like people that really rely on Pokemon that really rely on boosts to make themselves better. Crits just eat through that. Damage calculation, if you care about that, 2 times level, like all this doesn't really matter. The things that matter are your attack and defense. And this is, I put attack and defense for simplicity, but this is also special attack and special defense, whatever the move says, if it's a special or a physical move. Other things to note, some things that come at the end of the base damage, modifiers basically. Targets. If a move hits more than 1 target, it does only 75% damage. So if you're doing a double battle and you say use Earthquake, which hits everything on the field, instead of having 100 base power, it effectively has 75 base power. Now, that's still a lot. If you're hitting 2 enemies, 75-75 is still better than hitting 1 enemy for 1. It's just less concentrated. Weather. There's some weather that you can put on the field. It can give you a boost. It can give you a penalty. It affects stuff. It affects more than that too, but it affects stuff. Critical is a 1.5 multiplier, and what we just mentioned about how it exists with boosts, because boosts are normally taken into account whenever you're talking about this attack and defense comparison. There's the random modifier, so it's 0.85 to 1 modifier. Stab is at 1.5 multiplier that you can have, and then type. So this is the multiplier of, hey, I am a fighting type hitting a steel type. Fighting people know how to bash in swords and armor or whatever, so it does that ×2 multiplier. Now there is another kind of move that doesn't deal damage. Status moves. Non-damaging moves exist. They still have PP, so Thunderwave here, for example, you can only use it 20 times before it's gone forever. It has an accuracy. There's a 90% accuracy. You can tell a status move by this yin-yang kind of symbol right here. That's the only other symbol besides the like hypno symbol and the pow symbol. They have a lot of effects. Like, for example, Thunderwave here, it paralyzes the target. Paralyzed does mean something. No effects. These status moves are not the only things that can have effects. If you paid attention to some of the moves that I was showing off earlier, you can, like, Play Rough had an effect that it sometimes lowered the attack of the defender. So it gave one of those attack penalties to whoever was taking the damage from Play Rough. A ton of moves have additional effects associated with them, but usually they're not 100% chance of happening. So for example, that Play Rough chance was probably like a 10% chance. So 1 out of every 10 times that I actually hit with Play Rough, the defender will get a minus attack boost. Status moves always have an effect. There's no reason to use a status move except for its effect, because it doesn't do direct damage. There is one exception to that: Splash. Splash is a status move that does nothing at all. Now, there are a ton of status conditions. These are super important to play around and to understand. They're pretty big parts of the game. One thing to note about these status conditions is they do not vanish if you leave the field. So for example, if you're doing a battle and you're like, oh, I'm burned, I'm going to go in the back line and maybe my burn will be miraculously healed by the time I come back. That's not how it works. It doesn't go away unless you heal it, and you can't do that in the middle of a battle. You can with items, but items are not things that you can use within like a competitive sense. And if you're playing like hardcore nuzlocking, you're not going to be able to use items on that, depending on your rule set, but hardcore nuzlocking doesn't use items. Burns, you take damage over time. I think it's like 1/8 of your health, but more importantly, you do half damage for physical moves. So effectively, you get a penalty, an attack penalty whenever you're burned. Freeze, you just can't use a move until thawed. Fire moves, as well as a few other moves, will thaw you if they hit you. But otherwise, you're stuck there. You do have like, I think it's like a 20% chance every turn to be thawed, but that can last forever. Like if you're really unlucky, you're just frozen. Paralysis, you have 50% speed, so you're more likely to go second or last. And you have a 25% chance to not use a move. You select a move, and then there's a 1/4 chance that you just sit there and being like, well, I'm paralyzed, I can't do anything. Badly poisoned, poisoned and badly poisoned, you take damage over time. Badly poisoned starts out lower, but it ramps up. I think it does double poison damage every single turn that you take poison damage. Sleep, you can't take moves for 1 to 3 turns. Like, you are asleep. It's painful. There are also a few temporary status conditions that are important to know. Confusion, there is a 33% chance to damage yourself instead of using a move. It lasts for 2 to 5 turns. Flinch, you cannot use a move for the rest of the turn. Speed is super important for flinching, because if someone does something and they make you flinch, but they moved after you, the flinch doesn't do anything. Taunt, you can't use any status moves. You have to attack with every move. I've seen this happen a lot. It's a way to check people who are using status moves, so that they can't buff themselves, or they can't penalize you, or they can't help their team or anything like that. It's important. Encore, similarly, you can trap a Pokemon into repeating the last move for 3 turns, and then because you know what they're going to be using, you can play around that. Maybe you're trapping them into using something that you can resist, or you can just kind of take them off the field or something like that. There's a lot more here. Infatuation is a thing that exists. It's going to be more or less explained whenever you're looking at the move. But if you are curious as to what infatuation does, for example, the game itself doesn't really explain it very well. I would recommend going to one of those Pokemon resources like Bulbapedia or Serbi. One of those just to kind of get more specifics so that you can really play with them. Abilities. We're getting toward the tail end of this. There are 1 to 3 abilities per Pokemon. Every Pokemon has an ability. 0 to 1 of these are hidden. So the hidden abilities are just costly to get this, either in time or money, but sometimes they're significantly better than the abilities that you have, so you just want to do it. So you will have 1 or 2 abilities here, and then you'll have 1 hidden ability. Some Pokemon don't have hidden abilities. Some Pokemon are just locked into having a single ability. All of these abilities apply some sort of special rule, or they break a rule for your Pokemon, period. There are a ton of these. I don't know of another way to get to understand what all these abilities do, except to just play, to get experience, or to memorize. So for example, just to give you a few examples with Tinkaton here, Mold Breaker says that she ignores the ability of any other Pokemon when doing stuff. So for example, there may be there may be an ability that says, I'm immune to being flinched, which means that if you ever have any of those moves that can flinch a Pokemon, the flinch never takes effect for them. Tinkaton has Mold Breaker, so Tinkaton can make that Pokemon who's immune to flinching flinch. There's a lot of other things. So for example, I think this works if a Pokemon is immune to a certain type. So for example, if a Pokemon has Levitate, which lets them ignore all ground moves, Tinkaton has Mold Breaker. If she also had Earthquake, she could still hit a Pokemon with Levitate. This doesn't get around like flying types or anything. It's just abilities. Own Tempo says that you're immune to Confusion and also Intimidate. Intimidate is one, I don't think it's as important now, but it was super important for such a long time. Intimidate says whenever you go on the field, everyone gets an attack penalty. All your enemies get an attack penalty. It sort of cuts down the physical attackers really big. So Own Tempo makes you immune to Confusion. So if anyone's trying to run a Confusion stat, it doesn't work on me. And I'm immune to Intimidate. So if anyone's trying to intimidate me to lower my attack, it's not going to work. The hidden ability Pickpocket is whenever you make physical contact with a Pokemon, you steal their item, which is a nice segue into held items. Held items. There are so many held items, I cannot describe them all. Like, seriously, there are a ton of them. Apparently, there are only a handful of them that are actually used competitively, so look those up and know what they are. Now, just to give you an example of these, because whenever you're playing the games casually, berries are things that you might use. These can heal you whenever your Pokemon reaches a certain threshold, so like half health, you'll gain some health back. It can remove a status condition, so it can say, oh, if you ever get paralyzed, eat this berry and you'll immediately be unparalyzed. Or if you ever go to sleep, eat this berry and you'll immediately wake up. It can also weaken attack, so if you ever, like if you're worried about taking, say, fire damage or something, you can have a berry on you, and whenever someone does a fire move on you, you can just eat it and weaken that one fire attack. These berries are one use unless you can get them back somehow. But there are also items like Quick Claw, the most imbalanced item ever. It's one of the first items you get in any game, from what I remember. It's actually not great, but it does. It has a chance to just let you move first. I forgot to mention priority moves. Well, we'll have an advanced class later. Leftovers, just throw it away. It's not important. But yeah, there are some very competitive items. It's something that every Pokemon in a competitive play or in a competitive sense, or whenever you're doing a hardcore Nuzlocking, like whenever you're stepping up your game and you're trying to do something a little bit more difficult than playing the games casually, you are going to want to have a hold item. It's super important for you to to include it within your strategy. Now, there are some times you don't want to use a held item. Some examples would be if you want to use a pickpocket Tinkaton for some reason to steal someone's held item and use it against them or something. You cannot steal an item if you are already holding an item. So that would be a case that you don't want to have that. Another thing is acrobatics is a flying move and it doubles its power. So it doubles its damage if the person using it doesn't have a held item. So that's another case where you don't want to have an item if you want to have that boosted acrobatics. Anyway, it's not always important to have a held item, but it's always important to consider held items and how you are going to use them within your strategy. So VCG format. Wow, I went faster than I thought I would. So VCG format, this stands for the video game. I spelled it wrong. It's VGC format, very good content. VGC format is video game championships. I think it is like the official format that's like sponsored by the Pokemon company, as far as I understand. It's the format that I'm going to be playing with, that I've built my team for. It is a doubles battle. You have 2 Pokemon on each side. You can target either of the Pokemon. You can even target your own ally if you want to, for whatever reason. There are no duplicates in Pokemon or items. You create a 6 Pokemon team, and you choose any 4 of them to go out and fight. This, if I understand it correctly, this is to make the battles more exciting and, more importantly, faster. You can choose the possessions as well, so you can choose if they're going to start on the field or not. I think whenever you're going through an actual tournament, it's a best of 3 wins, so you fight, and whoever gets 2 wins first wins. There are also specific rules, like which Pokemons are banned, which ones aren't. It's a different format, and each season has a different season or series or something like that, has more rules. For example, Paradox Pokemon, which are kind of legendary but not really in the Pokemon Violet game, they were banned from Series 1, I think, but now they're allowed in Series 2. So that thing is just going to change how everything works. Team building. This is going to be one of my last slides before I go into my big spiel as to the lies that I told. There are a few ways that you can build a team. Now, this is something that I have no experience on, so take everything that I say with a grain of salt. Like in most, if not all, competitive games, there is a meta. This is just what is popular in the format. This includes individual Pokemon, what items exist, what moves are good, what strategies are super popular. So if you want to play a meta team, go play a meta team. Just see if you are better than other people playing the meta team. Another thing that you can try and do is look at the counter meta. This is what is popular in the format and what can specifically counter what's popular. So an example that I've been looking at recently is Tailwind is super important. Tailwind doubles the speed of one side. Now, there's one way, because going first in a Pokemon battle is super important. If you kill a Pokemon before they can move, they can't move. If you make a Pokemon flinch, they can't move. If you put a burn or something on a Pokemon, they're weakened when they try to attack you. Going first is such a huge advantage in Pokemon battling that getting Tailwind up means that you have such a huge advantage. There's a move called Trick Room. Trick Room says that whoever has the lowest speed goes first. So that's kind of an example of countering the meta. If Tailwind is super popular, maybe you build a super slow team and you go with a Trick Room set. Maybe you get priority moves. Priority moves just say you go first. Whoever is in a higher priority, those moves go before moves in a lower priority. Next is gimmick. It's a combination of things that may be very specific to pull off. It may not be that hard or anything. You could classify stall as a gimmick, where you just have big bulky Pokemon that take forever, and maybe you have a curse set, ghost curse set, or you have poison and you try and whittle down people. Or you can just find fun stuff. Like, I'll talk about team building in a video if I think it's interesting. But the way that I personally like to build my teams is I like to choose a Pokemon that I really, really like. And I need to find how they can be competitive, like what role they can fill in a competitive team. And then I build a team around that. That's what I find fun, or at least that's what I am finding fun. So for example, the team that I built, which I will probably be streaming on my second channel, Siege Lives or Siege Lives, sometime, hopefully this weekend. I'm almost done with building it up. Is I was originally going to be building a team around Hariyama. Hariyama is my actually favorite Pokemon. Umbreon is number 2. And I wanted to do like a Hariyama Umbreon set to see how I could build a team around that. I got rid of Umbreon for the time being, and I was like, okay, here's a Hariyama set. And then it shifted to be Doxbun. So I have a Doxbun set, and that's what I'm super excited to play whenever I finally get everything built up. I still have to get some cash to pay for some of the things that I need. So hopefully I'll be able to do that this weekend and have a lot of fun just diving in. That's part of the reason I need to make this video now, even though I'm not fully prepared, because I needed to put that I've never played competitive Pokemon battling before. Terra types, they exist. They exist. They're things. They're a new mechanic. Yeah, so everything that I said in this thing, the vast majority of it was a lie. For example, there are, let me just go through real quick to pull out the lies. I think I might have actually played against a person back in Heart Gold, Soul Silver era. I can't remember. Wolfie, no, that was true. The other thing is there are reasons that you do want to use some Pokemon that are quote-unquote weaker. For example, Murkrow is a Pokemon that is faster than Honchkrow, so if you want speed, that's great. Murkrow also has an ability that Honchkrow does not, called Prankster. Prankster is really good. It basically makes all your status moves faster. It goes up a higher priority bracket. There are legit reasons that you want to do that. Also, there's an item called Eviolite. Eviolite says that if you're not the final form of your evolution, your defenses get boosted. So, for example, being a Dunsparce with Eviolite is cool. I was doing a Nuzlocke several years ago. I think it was X and Y. I think it was X and Y, where I had a Machoke, and I was doing it where I wasn't trading with anyone, so I was stuck with Machoke. I had Eviolite Machoke, and I looked at the stat totals, and guess what? Eviolite Machoke is actually a pretty decent Pokemon, even compared to Machamp. Types, it is possible to actually have 3 of them, but that is a very, very specific situation. It is also possible to have 0 of them, but that is also a very, very specific situation. If you do not have a type, then you take neutral damage from everything. You just have a ×1 to everything. There are some moves where your HP matters. Reversal, for example, is a move that does more damage the lower HP you have. I think there is also a move that does more damage the more HP that you have. That might be an ability, though. Attack and special attack. This is pretty similar. There is a thing in IVs. There are some reasons that you want to min out a stat. For example, if you're doing a Trick Room set and you want to have a low speed, you want to have 0 speed. You want negative speed. That is something. Another thing is if you are not attacking, like if you have an entire moveset that uses your normal attack as opposed to your special attack, there's no reason for you to have a special attack. Similarly, if you have a Pokemon that does only special moves, it might actually be good to min your attack for 2 reasons. One, you do less damage from Confusion, because Confusion uses your special attack, or your Confusion uses your physical attack and physical defense when you're dealing damage to yourself. There's also a move called Foul Play, and what Foul Play does is it uses the defender's attack to deal damage. So if you've minned out your actual, like your physical attack, you'll do less damage whenever someone hits you with foul play. Like, you will take less damage. There are probably a few other examples here. Effort values. There are some items, I'll talk about this in a video if I ever get around to it, about training. You can get more than this. For example, I'm in the middle of EV training some of my Pokemon. I have these items that gives me a +8 in whatever I'm training. I've actually, I started doing this min-maxing thing, but I think I'm actually going to not do that for VGC. I think that it's much better in a singles format to min-max, to have sweepers and stuff like that, and I don't think it's quite as good when you are in a doubles format, because you have to, like, you can get hit by two different Pokemon. Like, you can get focused and die really easily. Nature, a lot of these natures are not good. Like, most of the time you're going to want to have a nature and not have a neutral stat, just because that 10% can be a lot, especially on a move, on a stat that's really high. Lowering your defenses is usually not a good strategy. I'm sure if you wanted to spend a lot of time to think about it, you can. But if you lower your defense, you're taking more damage. Now, the few times that I can think of where you might want to have a neutral nature is if you're doing like a mixed sweeper, where you want to be able to take things with a high defense or a high special defense, and you want to be able to, do whatever's most appropriate. You might want to go with a neutral nature. But I cannot think of a situation where you would want to have a lower defense. Maybe if you have a counter build and you just want to take as much damage as possible to be able to wipe someone else off the map. I don't know. Also, there are moves that do not do the physical attack, hits your physical defense. Psycho Cut, I think it's Psycho Cut, uses your special attack because it's a psychic move. Most psychic moves use special attack, but it hits the defender's defense. So it's this weird, I hit with my special attack, but I hit their defense. There's also Body Slam, which uses your defense to attack. I think it's called Body Slam. It's a fighting move. It came out a few generations ago. That's the only attacking move that I have on Doxbun. Category, that's right. Presumably higher numbers are always better for dealing more damage. Counter and Mirror Coat are cases where that's not the case, but sorry about this. I probably should have spent the time to make a My Lies segment. Also, there are some moves that always hit, so accuracy never goes into the factor at all. And also, I think those moves never crit, but there are some moves that always crit, and there are some moves that never crit. It just kind of depends on the move. Like, read through the move. They'll generally give you an idea of what is going on in the move description itself, but if you're ever curious, like you need to know more specifics, go to one of those Pokemon websites that'll actually tell you what the specifics are. All this stuff I just stole from Bulbapedia. Also, all these screenshots are actually from my game right now. Yeah, there are a lot of other temporary status conditions: being bound, being unable to escape. One other thing that I neglected to mention is that certain types actually have special effects beyond. So, for example, ghosts can always run away. This is in combat, like whenever you're running into a wild Pokemon. But it's also like if someone tries to bind you in place or something, ghosts can get away. That's just a thing they can do. Steel, I think, is immune to the poison condition. Poison Pokemon are immune to the poison condition. Fire Pokemon cannot be burned. Grass Pokemon are immune to poison, or not poison, but like spore moves and powder moves. Electric Pokemon can't be paralyzed. Ice Pokemon get a defense boost in the snow. Rock Pokemon get a special defense boost in the sandstorm. Like, there's a lot of different specifics. If you are building a Pokemon, like if you're building a team or if you're Nuzlocking, I definitely recommend going into that. If anyone's interested, I can talk about types, I guess, more broadly, but that seemed to be a little bit too advanced for just a basics. Anyway, my OBS is about to break. It seems to break at about the 1 hour mark of recording, not when I'm streaming, which is really weird. So I'm going to go ahead and end it here. Thanks a lot for watching. I hope that I now have a better understanding of these Pokemon basics so that whenever I do jump into competitive Pokemon battling, I'll be okay. And hopefully you enjoyed your time. And if I missed anything or if there were some mistakes / lies that I didn't cover in that really weird ad hoc, these are the lies of this video, put them down in the comments or yell at me. That's fine too. Also, Wolfie, if you see this video and you want me to take it down, just get in touch. Sorry for stealing your stuff. It was old. No, seriously, watch Wolfie's video. It's better than this. Bye!